few things. So we're going to look at questions. So there wasn't many questions on the form. Camille has asked two really good questions, so we'll just go through them. And then what we'll do is we'll review the Unit 11 Assessment 3 guidelines. So we'll go through just some key points. I'll highlight them to you. And if you have any questions, you can ask me. Then I'll give you some guidance on what you need to do to meet the ACs. And in order to do that, I'll show you I'll give some examples using the Case 4 report. So I'm not sure how long this is going to take us, to be honest with you. I'd be surprised if it took over an hour. But we will see how we go. If questions come up, that's fine. Yeah, and then hopefully this will give you some good support so that you can kind of finish off the assessment. And then you're done for the year. You know, it's been quite the roller coaster of a year with COVID, like coming in a third to the way or 2/3 of the way into the course. So I'd say you're all absolutely exhausted at this stage. So just hopefully we'll get you through this assessment now, and then you'll be able to take some time off. So let us go through the questions. So Camille asked, so I wanted to use the Gibbs cycle we used last year to reflect. Thus, I would discuss the strengths and weaknesses in the evaluation part. Can you guide me a little in what you expect in the other parts of the cycle? Should we discuss our feelings regarding both approaches, the conclusion and action plan, or a bit more about what we would do in the future or what we could have done? So I'm not really sure what to put there, as we will use the IFM approach. So Camille, this is a really good question. And yeah, for a lot of reflections, the Gibbs approach is quite a supportive tool. I'll show you the cycle in a second. However, for this question that you've been asked, whilst it is a reflection, it's more of a theoretical reflection in a way. So it doesn't require you to reflect on your feelings. So if we just look at the question itself, so the question is, having completed NLCD, what do you consider the strengths and the weaknesses of both the biomedical and functional medicine models to be? So this is up in Unit 10, and then as part of this unit as well, you've been able to compare and contrast how the biomedical and functional medicine models approach understanding disease pathogenesis in an individual. And there's 3 case studies that demonstrate that. And then you'll have also completed the clinical practice unit where you saw a full consultation, in a sense, or the first half of it anyway. So, so with this question, this is more of a theoretical question, and therefore the Gibbs cycle isn't as relevant. So the Gibbs cycle more comes in when it's a reflection on a personal action. So how did you get on in clinical practice in terms of explaining your findings to a client, or how did you find running a whole consultation? And that's when your feelings about the situation will come up. So if we look at the Gibbs reflection, you know, it's about describing, so what was the event that happened? How are you thinking and feeling? What was good about it? Not so good? Can you do a further analysis? What else could you have done? And if it arose again, what would you do? So this cycle itself, it's a really, really good tool for you to use in clinical practice. So when you run the consultation, you can step back and think about, well, what worked well, what didn't, how would I change it for next time? Even doing a presentation, let's say, like how did I manage that? Not necessarily just the what's the word? The actual material within the PowerPoint, but let's say you're someone who finds giving presentations challenging, and you know that you're going to have to be able to do this as an NT, and you might reflect on your experience delivering the presentation and think, well, how did it go? How did I feel about it? Did I manage certain aspects of it well? What things could I put in place next time to support me so I might feel a little bit less anxious? You know, that's the kind of situation where a cycle like this could be really helpful. However, with this question, I think if you use this cycle, like, you're more than welcome to try and use it. You're definitely not going to be marked down for that. But I think you might end up getting a little bit muddled because it's not so relevant to the question specifically, because it's a bit more of a theoretical question. That being said, you could act or reflect somewhat on your experience in the role play and say, I think a strength of the functional medicine model is doing the timeline, because I felt, I'm even personally role playing it, I could feel that, you know, it could be very valuable for a client telling their story, and that's something that the biomedical model doesn't have space to do. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. Or, you know, again, we've mentioned the strengths of, I'm not going to actually give you too many examples, because we're genuinely interested to see, having completed the year, what do you think the strengths and weaknesses are? This question you don't meet any ACs in, it's part of your clinical practice portfolio. So it's just for you, really, it's more for you than, well, it's all for you in a sense, but in terms of this assessment anyway, this is more for you than just about meeting ACs. It's having completed the year, you know, you're going to be a healthcare professional. So what do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of both of these models, having completed the NLCD and moved through the different units? So it's just a time for you to pause and reflect. So does that make sense, Camille?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, great. So then your other question was, could you also review how to reference a movie, in this case, the movie Unrest? So yeah, it's not in the PowerPoint specifically, but it is in, this is a really, really good resource. So you will have a link to this in your referencing guidelines PowerPoint. It's the UCD referencing resource section of their website. And in here you'll see, so like there's the Harvard style guideline. And if you scroll down, it'll show you, keep scrolling, film and television. So you click on this, that comes up. And again, they give really clear guidelines here on how to do that. So the title of the film, the director. In something like this, if you watched it on Netflix, you can just put Netflix. And if there was any films that were, let's say, on YouTube, there's also guidelines on how to do that as well. Or is it film on YouTube? So this is a really, really good resource. And pretty much everything you're looking for is there. There's just a couple of anomalies in how we ask you to reference. And they're some of the ones that we include in the PowerPoint. So for example, we ask you to include the slide number on the PowerPoints, IHS PowerPoints, because we know you're going to reference them a lot within the course. Whereas in the Harvard style, you don't have to put in the page number in the citation. So the PowerPoint is there to kind of just highlight some anomalies, as well as some of the obvious references. So that's a good resource that you can use. It also has other referencing styles as well. So it's definitely a good guide.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll upload this PowerPoint afterwards, or I'll put it in the Dropbox folder so you can just click those links. So now we will have a look. So we'll just go through the actual assessment document. So this is your last assessment of the year, and in some ways it's where a lot of the unit 7, 8, and 9 comes together in a sense. You have a little bit of extra support in this assessment than you do in your Unit 11 assessment too, however, in that we've given you actually the completed case. So whereas in Unit 11 assessment 2, you had to work it out yourselves in pairs. And in this assessment, we've given you a bit more support, because we know that writing a report is very challenging. So we've given you more support in terms of actually taking you through the case. And then ultimately what you need to do is to put words or text to what's in that PowerPoint, specifically really the mind map. So we'll go through it now. So this again, so it's a case report. I'm sure a number of you anyway have probably started it at this stage, but for those of you who haven't, so this is a case report and a reflective question. It's 2,600 words. It's really important that you do stick within the word count. If you don't stick within the word count, we're just going to send you back the assessment straight away. So please make sure to, I've put some guidelines in here, just it'll help you to make sure that you do it. But just at the end of each of these parts, just put in how many words it is, and it'll just be a way for you to keep on track. So that's really important to stay within the word count. You do need to include a reference list, and so aim for at least 10 different references. And you can use a mix of both secondary sources, such as the IHS PowerPoint, but then we also, would suggest that you use primary sources as well. So you can look at some of the references that we've included in the IHS PowerPoints, or if you find some of your own primary sources, that's great. But it is important that you include at least one of them in your reference list. And then there's also a bibliography. So a bibliography is kind of an additional resource that highlights where you got your additional reading from. And there's different agreements as to what exactly is a bibliography. So some people say it's everything, including what you've cited and what you haven't. And others will say it's everything, it's only what you haven't cited. It's additional reading that you've used to inform kind of how your understanding of the topic. And so you don't have to, for this assessment, you just have to, your reference list contains all the sources that are cited in the assessment itself. And the bibliography is just any additional resources that weren't cited. And it's good to show readers where you've kind of got your thought process from, or what's influenced your thought process. And in this bibliography, it can be anything from the case 4 or the case 4. I think that's what Alba was asking. It can be the case 4 PowerPoint. It can be a book like Digestive Wellness. It can be a primary article, or it can be a review. It can be anything you want, and anything that's kind of informed your reading. Okay, or informed your assessment. So that is so remember, word count, reference list, and bibliography. And then this is the report itself. So we've given you a structure to follow, and this is just a really good resource for you to have. So when you go out to practice, if you ever have to write up a case report, it's not going to be likely that you have to do it. God, you definitely won't have to do it every consultation, otherwise it would take you too long. But there may be a situation where you need to write up a case report, and now you have the template and you have the skill set to do it if you've completed the assessment. So if we just go through the structure of it. So there's an introduction, so that's 500 words, or around 500 words. So you just want to outline the aim of the report and what you intend to do. So any good introduction will tell the reader what's the aim of the article or the report, and how you are going to structure it. So what you intend to do. And then what we've asked you to do is to give a brief synopsis of the client and the client's main health concerns, name conditions, and goals or aims. So this is just a way to introduce the reader to the client. So if you were to write up a case report for, let's say, a nurse or another healthcare practitioner or a GP, and they might not know who the client is. So this is a way to kind of summarize the client. So just give a very brief description of the client, including age, gender, occupation, height, weight, and then include their presenting symptoms and health goals, and then any additional information you feel is particularly pertinent to the case, especially red flags, if any, and any other named conditions that the client has. So I'm just going to pull up, where's case 4 gone? Here we go. So this is case 4, and if you haven't read this, I'd really encourage you to do so. You'll find this in the Unit 11 Assessment 3 folder. It's called Support for Unit 11 Assessment 3. And so just in here, this is the overview. So this is the introduction piece. So this is saying the aim of the report is to evaluate what nutrition, lifestyle, and environmental factors have contributed to the development of clients' health concerns. And then this just outlines what you're going to discuss in the report. And then this part here is the client synopsis. So on this, this is for case 4. And so there's a summary of the client. So his age, ethnicity, his health concerns. And then there's a little bit of background information here. So that he's divorced, his 2 girls. So you can include some very brief background information on the girl from case 6. Now, what has been included in here and wasn't actually asked in this section here is the client's stress, sleep, exercise, and diet. Now, I'd encourage you to do that. You don't have to, but it is good to include basically you're outlining this client's, or you're giving a summary of the client's lifestyle factors. So their stress, their sleep, exercise, and their diet. And this is quite good because it means that in this way you've introduced the reader, or you've given the reader a bit of a background information, so that if later on in the main body of the report you're saying, low sleep could contribute to X, you've already told the reader that the client maybe has unrefreshed sleep, or in this case I think this lady still does, or this girl still does, but also things like exercise or their diet. You don't have to explain, you don't have to give background information in the main body or in terms of explaining these points if you've already done it here, so the reader has an idea of what's the fundamental lifestyle factors in this, or the client's fundamental lifestyle factors. So you can see here he rates his stress 8 out of 10, and noted that he's under financial pressure. So this is some of the sources of his stress. He doesn't exercise, although he said he used to. So it's just giving a bit of a background information. For this example as well, we have included appendices. So there's a timeline and there's a matrix. You see down here. So you haven't been asked to do this in the assessment. If you want to include the timeline and the matrix, you can take a screenshot of them from the PowerPoint. That's absolutely fine, because it might be a good resource for you in a year's time if you're reading back and you want to see the timeline and the matrix. You don't need to do it for us here, but it's, you can if you want. So that's the synopsis piece. In the case report, there's a section on the pathophysiology of metabolic syndrome. You haven't been asked to do that for case 6, but it's just here. What you have been asked to do, you'll see here, is to list the clinical imbalances that IFM outlines could contribute to the development of CFS. So it's just listing here some of the clinical imbalances. And the reason for this is that sometimes if you're doing a really comprehensive differential diagnosis, and I know we don't use the word differential diagnosis, but differential clinical imbalance, it's good to list all the things that the client could be experiencing and then to kind of rule them out. Now, for the purpose of time, and I know Gwen had said during the assessment for Unit 11 Assessment 2 that you didn't have to talk about every single possible clinical imbalance. It's good to just outline or discuss or describe the clinical imbalances that are a priority. However, for you guys in practice, it can be good to list all the clinical imbalances that you could be thinking are having an impact, or theoretically could be having an impact, and that can help to inform your information gathering, and you can kind of rule out all the different ones. And that's a certain style or approach to practicing. It's not everyone's going to use that. It's quite methodical and it can take a bit more time. Personally, I kind of like it because I'm quite systematic in how I think. So if I have a kind of a method of or way of approaching something, I can move through much quicker. And it's a way of kind of cross-referencing everything. You don't have to do that. And you may find when you practice, that doesn't work for you. So I'm just outlining or suggesting it might be a way that you work. And that's why we've asked you to list the potential ones here. And then we have the main body. So in this section here, so the main body of the report is 1,500 words. And this is where you basically do an evaluation of all the potential clinical imbalances the client could be experiencing, or evaluation of all the potential and more specifically the key clinical imbalances, and then evaluate the nutrition, lifestyle, and environmental factors that could have contributed to them. So this is really your interpretation, in a sense, your evaluation. As I said, you've gotten lots of support in this case because we've actually gone through case 6 with you. So there's the timeline, and here's the matrix, and then there's this mind map. If you haven't listened to, if you, for those of you who weren't at the lecture weekend, if you haven't listened to Gwen's piece at the end, she did a discussion on this, and I also have an audio. I'd really encourage you to, because it gives you, it'll kind of give you an idea of the level of detail that we're looking for, and hopefully give you some support as well. So this is the mind map that outlines some of the key clinical imbalances that the client could be experiencing. Definitely cortisol and dysglycemia are also going to be playing a role. I think I think we got a little bit tunnel visioned when we were creating this case, because we really want you to understand this interrelationships between mitochondrial dysfunction, toxic load, oxidative stress, and nutrient status. But definitely as well in your assessment, if you want, if there's space, you can also mention briefly dysglycemia and cortisol. It is important though in the assessment that you do spend a good chunk of time discussing mitochondrial dysfunction, because there's specific ACs that you have to meet around mitochondrial dysfunction, and it's important to understand mitochondrial dysfunction as well, because it can come up for people who have ME/CFS, but other individuals as well. So we basically really want you to explain this mind map in a sense. So that's what the main body of the report should be, is explaining this. And then if you want to add in as well, if you want to mention, cortisol, dysglycemia, they'll naturally come in places. There might be space to do that. You could touch on hypochlorhydria, but if you spend a large part of the main body discussing hypothyroidism, if you spend a lot of the main body discussing hypothyroidism, you'll have missed the key point that this is important to discuss as well. So that's really what you need to do to meet the ACs in this assessment. It's really important that you discuss and explain what mitochondrial dysfunction is, the different factors that could be contributing to it in this case, and how biotransformation, assimilation, and immune imbalances play a role in this too. So let me just show you this part. So in the main body, it's important to introduce the section and again include an overview of what clinical imbalances you are going to discuss, and the order in which you plan to discuss them. And then for each clinical imbalances listed, it's important to justify why you think the client is experiencing that clinical imbalance by including associated signs and symptoms. Include an evaluation of what nutrition, lifestyle, and environmental factors in the short and long term may have led to the development of the clinical imbalance. And then also outline how that clinical imbalance could have impacted on the development of other clinical imbalances and ultimately the client's health concerns. So this is the general template for the general kind of structure or approach to take for each clinical imbalance. And basically what we're trying to help you to do here is to develop a way to kind of do a thorough evaluation of what the factors that could be contributing to the client's health concerns. And hopefully you'll have seen that this is really similar to what you were doing in Unit 7, 8, and 9 when you were doing the element of a report. We were helping you to build up the skills to do that so that you could do it now in a bigger case report. So I'm just going to show you some examples here. And again, you'll have already practiced doing this through doing the presentation. But this will hopefully give you an understanding or an idea of the level that we're looking for in the assessment. So if I show you here, so this is the clinical imbalances evaluation, the introduction piece. And then we've broken it down here into assimilation imbalances, communication, and then immune, and then there's a conclusion. You could have a section called energy imbalances, and then discussing mitochondrial dysfunction, or what else is in there, biotransformation and elimination imbalances. If I just come back up here. So this is an example paragraph. So of what, of what we're looking for. So the client may be experiencing hypochlorhydria as he suffers from belching and bloating after eating. So it's important, and this will be in clinical practice as well, that if you identify a clinical imbalance that you think the client is experiencing, you have to justify that with signs and symptoms. So that's what is here. So the client may be experiencing hypochlorhydria as he suffers from belching and bloating after eating. And then it's looking at, well, what are the factors that could contribute to that? So the client is rated as stress, 8 out of 10. This may contribute to hypochlorhydria as stress inhibits the action of the parasympathetic nervous system. The PNS stimulates HCl production directly and indirectly through the action of gastrin. So this is including a mechanism by which stress could be contributing to low HCl. And then in this evaluation, it's saying, okay, well, what are the other factors that could contribute to hypochlorhydria? So there are other factors which could contribute, including nutrient deficiencies and medication. Nuts, whole grains, and red meat are all sources of zinc and B1. Whilst the client's diet is low in nuts and whole grains, he does eat meat, thus he may not be deficient in zinc and B1. The client doesn't report taking any proton pump inhibitors. Therefore, it's likely that stress is the main factor driving the hypochlorhydria. So this is what we're looking for in an evaluation. It's going, well, what are all the factors that could be contributing to this imbalance, and what ones are relevant for the client? Now, to do this, if you were to do this for every imbalance, it would be quite laborious, and you don't have to. Like if you do it for at least, one, ideally two, that's really good. I'll just show you another one here. Where is it? Was it here? So this is one. So it's difficult to discern if the client is experiencing intestinal permeability without testing. So this paragraph now is about IP. It would be important to test, as intestinal permeability combined with dysbiosis may contribute to increased circulating microbiome-derived lipopolysaccharides and therefore contribute to metabolic endotoxemia. This may lead to low-grade chronic inflammation and MET-S. So this part here, and this is also important, is outlining why this imbalance is important to the client's overall health concerns. So in this case, metabolic syndrome is the health concern, and this is the mechanism by which IP might contribute to MET-S. And then this is the evaluation here on the nutrition and lifestyle and environmental factors. So we've got this. There are a number of factors that could contribute to IP, including stress, food sensitivities, nutrient deficiencies, zinc and vitamin A, medication, alcohol, and dysbiosis. So these are all the different factors that could contribute to it. And then whilst the client, I'll tell you why I've highlighted this red in a sec, but whilst the client does experience bloating after eating, he doesn't experience discomfort or fatigue. Therefore, it's unlikely the food sensitivities are a major factor in this case. So I've highlighted that in red, by the way, because it's somewhat true. Like after I've read through this again, there are people who have food sensitivities and don't experience fatigue or discomfort. But this is just showing you a way of kind of, ruling out different ones. So that's just a part of it there. But anyway, so the client has been taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs for the last 12 years for back pain. If intestinal permeability is present, it is likely that they, or NSAIDs, are the main factor contributing to it. Alcohol consumption, dysbiosis, stress may have also played a role in the development. So we know that things like medication, like NSAIDs, will have a really big impact on IP. And if the client's been taking them for 12 years, you can take it that that's going to be a big factor. And then these are other factors. So just in this evaluation here, what we've done is we've outlined all the different factors that could be playing a role. And then we've ruled out one and then highlighted a key one and then mentioned some of the other ones. So if you can do that just once or twice for the clinical imbalances, that's great. If other times you're just listing, the client may, let me give you another example of where we've just listed. Yeah, here. So this is the one around dysbiosis. So we see here, it would be good to determine how long he's experienced bloating and digestive symptoms, as it's possible he's been experiencing a degree of dysbiosis from childhood. He suffered with tonsillitis, which was treated with antibiotics. He was also not breastfed. So ironically, some of the factors are kind of similar in this case to the ones you're writing. But anyway, use of antibiotics and lack of breastfeeding have been shown to contribute to a reduction in microbial diversity and dysbiosis. Other factors, including stress and low fiber, could also have played a role. And this is a bit of a mechanism as to how stress can play a role. And then we just outline here, the client's diet is lacking fruit fiber as he consumes little fruit, vegetables, and whole grains. And we also know that he's stressed as well from other discussion earlier on. So this is an example of where we haven't done an actual evaluation where you're listing all the different factors and ruling out one and saying which one is having more of an impact than the other. You don't have to do that for every single one, but if you can do it once, that'd be great, because it's just showing that you can think in a very kind of systematic, methodical way. And that's really good for kind of trying to get to the heart of a case in a sense. But there's going to be other times where you'll just be listing, the client, these are the factors that could have contributed to it, and this is evidence of them in the client's diet and lifestyle. The key thing is that you keep bringing it back to the case. So when you're outlining the factors that could be contributing to the imbalance, it's so important that you link it back to the case study and give examples. And that'll be then, that is really a key part of it, that you can bring it back to the case and you're making it specific to the client. There was just one other thing that I wanted to show you. Sorry, one sec. If possible as well, it's important as well to include some mechanisms. So you can see here, let me just find you one. So you see here, so the client has a BMI of 30, which is considered obese. Visceral obesity has been shown to play a central role in insulin resistance development. And then this is the mechanism. So adipokines, including interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha, and free fatty acids are released from excess adipose tissue. All three have the potential to interfere with insulin signaling and glucose uptake, which in turn leads to insulin resistance. So for some imbalances, or when it's appropriate, it's important that you can link or outline some mechanism by which how the imbalance is contributing to the overall health concern. So, you could say in relation to assimilation imbalances that IP may contribute to low-grade systemic inflammation. This is in turn going to increase oxidative stress and dysregulate the Krebs cycle, resulting in secondary mitochondrial dysfunction and therefore potentially ME/CFS. So it's linking back how the imbalance is basically linking to the client's health concerns. And the reason why this is a good skill, or it is a skill to be able to do, is because if you're sitting down with a client and you start talking about, their bloating or their bloating or they're belching, they might not understand, and that's what you want to support them with in the consultation. They might be really confused. What does their digestion have to do with, let's say, their ME/CFS symptoms? So it's just good that you can, at this stage, write it out in practitioner language, and then next year you'll learn how to translate that into client-centered language as well. So that is some of the key points. I'm going to come back to this in a second. There's just an AC here. So some of you are picking up an AC from Unit 8, and it's discuss interrelationships between assimilation, biotransformation, elimination, energy, and immune imbalances. So by explaining this mind map, you're going to be naturally doing that. So if you're explaining how maldigestion or digestive imbalances contributes to an increase in toxic load, you're showing a relationship there. If you're showing how maldigestion contributes, or assimilation imbalances contribute to low-grade systemic inflammation and thus mitochondrial dysfunction, you're demonstrating how that you can understand the relationships between the different clinical imbalances. So let me just give you another example of that in here. Bear with me just one sec. Oh yeah, this is. So that one was there around intestinal permeability, endotoxemia, low-grade inflammation, and MED-S. This is kind of an example. Clinical imbalances including hypercortisolemia, chronic inflammation, and abdominal obesity could also play a role in driving insulin resistance. And then there's some explanation there. And then it kind of builds on it here as well. So there's hypercortisolemia can contribute insulin resistant directly, and then there's some of the mechanisms. So that's hopefully it's a good report to give you an example that will give you an idea of what we're looking for. To pass the ACs, it is just important that you're able to explain this diagram at a sufficient level of detail and put particular emphasis on mitochondrial dysfunction and all these different factors that can contribute to it. Sorry, let me just see. And then finally, so then there's just a conclusion to this, just a summary. You summarize by outlining what clinical imbalances you think are key to the case and list the factors that have collectively driven them. And there's a good example in that case report. And then the final questions then is compare and contrast the biomedical and functional medicine approach to chronic fatigue syndrome. So make sure you outline how they are similar in their approach to the pathophysiology and how they're different, and then how they're similar to the pathogenesis and how they're different. And actually, sorry, you don't have to do it for each of those points because it might not be as relevant for this one. But you've got to include one similarity and one difference at least one point. Okay. So does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Maura.
Hi.
I just had I suppose just when you were kind of going over the kind of structure of like how to do like the main body of the report.
Yeah.
I was just kind of wondering because I mean, I've only kind of just at the moment, I'm only just kind of finishing up with kind of discussing the mitochondrial dysfunction, but I feel like mine's looking very scientific, like the way I've written it out. I just feel like I'm kind of like panicking as in to say like, oh, I need to really delve into like oxidative stress, for example. And I'm kind of like feeling like I have to really delve into like explaining that. And I'm just wondering, is that kind of necessary, or like do we really have to worry like so much about really delving into kind of like, you know, the main kind of stuff there?
Like this, like you've seen this like a sentence or two immerse, like it's almost like the clinical balances form the main structure of it, let's say, like your discussion on them. So like, let's say each imbalance gets a paragraph, or even each of these can get a paragraph. And then you don't have to explain in detail what oxidative stress is. You can take it that we know what it is, but what you can say is that, you know, you don't have to explain exactly, you don't have to explain what oxidative stress is to us, but you can say, let's say the client might be experiencing a degree of oxidative stress. There is some research to show that individuals with ME/CFS, I think it is with them anyway, are more prone to oxidative stress, and this may damage the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain, thus contributing to secondary mitochondrial dysfunction. And you might choose to include one more line of detail around it can contribute to anomalies in the Krebs cycle by damaging enzymes and damaging the mitochondrial membrane itself. But that's the max level that you need to go to. And if you didn't include that, you'd still be passing. It's just showing that that you're not just saying the client could be experiencing oxidative stress. How does that relate to the overall symptoms? And what is really important then is with the oxidative stress that you outline the factors that could have contributed to it. So, the client may, an increase in reactive oxygen species is going to lead to the development of oxidative stress. Exercise, high intensity exercise could be a factor in the case the client used to do a lot of marathons. And equally, low antioxidant status will also play a role. And what is important here is actually that you then be specific as to what aspects of the client's diet in particular, you could say lifestyle as well, may have contributed to the low antioxidant status. So for example, the client might be low in manganese because she's not eating X and Y, or selenium, let's say. These nutrients are important for cofactors for glutathione peroxidase. And let's say, what's the other one? Yeah, well, I'm regenerating glutathione. That kind of level of detail is important, that you're bringing it back to the case and being specific. So just saying she has a low nutrient diet isn't enough. Like if you do that once or twice or 3 times, that's fine. But if every time you mention her diet, you're just saying low nutrient diet, you need to get specific and go, she could be low in selenium. She doesn't eat any Brazil nuts or nuts in any way. And that's an important cofactor for specific antioxidants. Equally, she might be low in cysteine, specific amino acids, because she doesn't eat meat. And she doesn't eat a lot of legumes. I know she does have some, but it is potential that she's low in certain amino acids, and this might affect glutathione production. So is that kind of giving you a bit more of an idea?
Yeah, definitely. I think I just need to start making it a bit more kind of personalized rather than having to kind of worry about having to explain everything. So that's really helped. Thanks, Maura.
Yeah, it's great. Well, and it means as well then that you've done the hard part of it now, and now you just link it back to the client. Yeah. So have a look at this, because you'll see where there's like 2 or 3 sentences max, and it's never really explaining what exactly dysbiosis is. Let's say it's explaining how dysbiosis may lead to or affect the client's other clinical imbalances or their overall health concerns. So like, where is it? This is kind of the most detail that you go into. Like, the client may be experiencing dysbiosis as he suffers from bloating, low bacterial diversity, and an increased ratio of F2B are associated with obesity, low-grade inflammation, and insulin resistance. If you included that would probably be enough. Ideally, this is quite a bit of detail here actually in terms of the mechanisms. And if we will give you feedback if you don't include certain points, because that's what we're going to do is to help you to show how you could develop your further. But if you were to include that level, that would be a good starting point, and then in a few places include a bit more detail. But you can see here, Alva, that you're not explaining what low bacterial diversity is. We know what low bacterial diversity is. It's how does low bacterial diversity affect the clinical imbalances, other clinical imbalances, and the client's health concerns.
Perfect. Thank you, Maura. That's really that's clarified a lot. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Maura?
Yeah.
If, for example, we want to explain that she has an inability to provide necessary substrates to the mitochondria, so we will have maybe to explain that glycolysis might be impaired. Do we have to go into details and explain about all the enzymes in the Krebs cycle? Or do we just say that it can lead to oxidative stress. And then she will have to use other substrates, and then explain with the carnitine, and then she's a vegetarian, and do we just that kind of level of details? Do we?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't have to explain what the Krebs cycle is or even what specific enzymes could be down. You could just say, like, if the client doesn't have these nutrients, it might affect the activity of the Krebs cycle, or let's say it's like glycolysis as well, and that can contribute to fatigue. So you don't need to explain exactly what the Krebs cycle is, but you can mention what's more important is mentioning the specific coenzymes and cofactors that are needed that she might be low in.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we don't have to start talking about the pyruvate, and citrates, and all. We don't have to talk about all this.
No, if you're able to kind of include it in the discussion and say, like, there's 2 specific enzymes, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a citrate and isocitrate.
Yeah,
like that. If I remember.
He's one. You could say, yeah, this would be the max that you'd be expected to include, to say, there is some research to show that individuals with ME/CFS might have defects or issues with specific enzymes in the Krebs cycle, namely citrate synthase and oxidase. That's the max you need to go to. Explaining that this enzyme aconitase converts citrate into isocitrate, that you don't need to do that at all.
No.
It's just saying, if you were to say there might be imbalances in specific Krebs cycle enzymes, and the client may be low because the client might be deficient in cofactors, it's important to name the cofactors. If you end up putting in the enzymes here, it's a bonus. Like, we don't have grades, let's say, but this would be like, a first include. If we did have grades, putting this kind of level of detail would be, kind of the most that you'd be expected to do, in a sense. And it is okay if you have a sentence, if it kind of flows into it, but definitely explaining what the Krebs cycle is and what these specific enzymes do. You can take it that we know that, what we might not, what the reader might not know is that, that individuals with ME/CFS, actually there's some research to show that they may have issues with these enzymes, and that could be blocking their energy production. And there's a number of reasons why they might have issues with these enzymes, and this is them here. Okay. So it's kind of straddling this balance between mentioning, it's kind of trying to weave in the client's story into all of these imbalances, and that is important. It's definitely important to link it back to the client as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Like, this is an example of where it's just talking through the theory, and there's some like clinical parts of it, but it's quite theoretical based. There's no case study feeding into it. So it's really important that you bring it back to the client when you're discussing some of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if in doubt, if you get lost, and hopefully, I know some people hate mind maps, and for those of you who do, I'm sorry, but you can read through. All the information is in this PowerPoint. If you include extra, that's amazing, but to pass, there's nothing, if you include what's in here, you don't have to include every single point, of course, but this is kind of a verbal version, or not a verbal, a written part of this mind map. But if you are a mind map person, you're just trying to explain, putting text to this diagram.
Yeah, that's why I was asking you, because if you look on the mind map, you talk about abnormality in the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. So you've got to explain why. No, do you have to explain what are what the
abnormality is?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can say there can be imbalances in the specific enzymes. If you were to say there could be abnormalities in the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain, and these are the factors that can contribute to it, that would still be enough to pass. but in an ideal world, you go into a little bit more detail and say, that the enzymes that are needed within the Krebs cycle might be damaged due to oxidative stress or toxic load, and that can impair energy production.
So you can link it to the toxic load,
yeah.
And then you can explain why she's low in antioxidant or the antioxidant enzymes, because she's lacking of the cofactors. So that's how you can link it then.
Yeah, exactly.
And without having to go into details with all the enzymes that are involved in the Krebs cycle.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Yeah, you don't have to go into detail on every single enzyme. You could mention like the names of them in passing if that's the level that you're working at. But what is important is that you're outlining oxidative stress could contribute to these abnormalities, and that will then impair energy production. The hardest part of this assessment is going to be probably structuring it, because there's so many different things going on in this case, and it's spending a bit of time. How are you going to explain this? And it's that's why we've given you support, because it's a difficult thing to do, and that's why we've given you support with this. And so this is kind of a bit of a prompt, and then it's about you spending a bit of time sitting down and going, how am I going to organize this information? Like how am I going to break it into paragraphs? Because you see here, where's it gone? Like in this one here, there was actually a paragraph on dysbiosis and how it contributes to MET-S. And then there was a paragraph around, well, what are the factors that could contribute to it? Because it's quite a big part of the case in a sense. You might end up doing something like this for mitochondrial dysfunction. So it's not like every single paragraph is going to be the same. It's just you thinking about how are you going to organize this information and explain what you think is happening in the case.
And when do you talk about assimilation imbalances? Rather at the end, or you can just...
Assimilation?
Yeah, like a... Do we work like on a mind map? Do we work from like the bottom right and then we go all the way to the top left? Or
it's a really good, I think there's different ways. I think probably because I'm not going to say there isn't a specific way to do this, because it's people have different kind of ways in which they organize information, and that will come through in how you write it. But I would imagine that it will probably be the easiest to start with secondary mitochondrial dysfunction, explain how it relates to ME/CFS, and then almost go, as you said, backwards and explain these different things. You could have secondary mitochondrial dysfunction, you could have a paragraph in each of these, and then like a paragraph on oxidative stress, paragraph on toxic load, how it relates to this. There's different ways in which you can organize it. But I would suggest, I don't want to say, because if someone really doesn't want to start with secondary mitochondrial dysfunction as an imbalance because they feel they can explain it better in a different way, that's absolutely fine. But I would imagine for a lot of people, it will probably be easier to start with this one and then work backwards.
Okay, thank you, Maura.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Maura, it's Jill. Can I just ask a couple of small questions, please?
Yeah.
Instead of referring to the client, can we say Emily after we put Emily in after the client the first time? Or would you prefer it to be client the whole way through?
I think because you see the whole thing that it's a case report, and sometimes you have to leave out people's names and that, yeah. And if you really want to, it's fine, like but I think that sometimes that's why with case reports they won't use the actual name.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, is it right or wrong to personalize it? Yeah, it's fine, like either way.
Yeah.
And then Sorry, I missed the first few minutes. You may have mentioned it, but in the first question, do we need to reference at all the additional notes? Yeah.
No.
Cite reference it. Yeah, do we need to cite it at all and then reference it? Because we obviously would be using that for the information in that first question.
Yeah, so you don't, do you mean?
Do I need to do I need to reference it, cite it, you know, that the anywhere within the answer on question 1, like say we said her age, her gender, whatever.
No, just include all that.
Just include all that. So it's not, so that's just straightforward on that one. Okay. And then the word count per question. So say it's 300 words on a particular question. Does the 10% below or above, does that mean then that you can assume you can work to 330 on that question and overall coming in at 10%? I know it's kind of obvious, but or do we have to stick to the exact word count per question?
You can go that you could work to 330.
Okay, so you can do that way, okay. And then I think you said about the appendices as well. We don't have to do that for the timeline and the matrix, adding them on, but we can if we want.
Yeah, and it's more for you for, let's say, if you might be looking back at this assessment in a year or two, and it'll kind of help to refresh, you know, for you.
Okay. And then,
you know, hopefully you're going to keep this as a, you know, this isn't just kind of doing an assessment to meet an AC. Like, we're really hoping that this is a skill that you'll be being able to write a case report, and so you can refer back to this in a couple of years if you need to, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Like it's like a reference case when it's completed. And then also, is it acceptable to say CFS all the way through, CFS, as opposed to chronic fatigue syndrome?
Yeah. So what you do is, let's say in the, you know, this is just good practice, is that if you're ever abbreviating, that you write the full, myalgic, I can't pronounce that word, whatever, ME, what that is, it's chronic fatigue syndrome, and then put in brackets ME-CFS, and then you can refer to it as ME-CFS the whole way for the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm just trying to work on the word count here.
Okay.
Where can I save and where can't I? Okay, that's great. They're my questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Moira, in a real world context, where would you use this case report? When would you be asked to produce a case report?
So if, let's say, you were working with, let's say you have been working with someone for quite a while. Let's say this girl did, you were working with someone like this, and you wanted to collaborate with her GP, and you wanted to write up an analysis of what you think could be going on with the case, and it might be someone who isn't as familiar with this kind of area, and now you could ask, you know, if she wanted you to collaborate, like you could charge extra for writing up something like this, because it would take time. But if, let's say, you were writing with her GP, and you could say, listen, I'm a functional medicine nutritionist, nutritional therapist, and this might be part of it. Now, in that case, you wouldn't need to do this piece, but you still might be doing a synopsis, actually, because it's just good practice to include it all, because they might pass it on to someone, or, you know, that kind of way.
Sure, yeah.
It's like, it's not going to be something that you're going to do on a regular basis, but it's good to be able to do this if you ever need to.
Yeah. So you're not writing it as a case, like as in submitting to an academic journal or something. This is something you'll be doing in practice to have somebody, support somebody with collaboration. Yeah, okay. Cool, thanks.
And again, it's also helping. Sorry, go. Whoever's next.
Sorry, Moira. I was just going to ask one last question, something I'd forgot that I only kind of thought of this evening when I was kind of writing up my thing. It was in relation to antioxidants, because I understand that, like in the PowerPoints, it talks about, you know, the client having lower levels of, or just someone who has CFS having lower levels of antioxidants, but there's nothing that really mentions about dietary antioxidants, and I was just wondering if you could kind of give a bit of clarification on that.
That's a really good point. And actually, I don't know. So I think it's where, and it's kind of within, let's say, areas of IFM, it can be quite regular practice to test for glutathione status or SOD and glutathione peroxidase, and maybe that's why there's a little bit more research on it. I don't even know if it's possible to actually test for, let's say, polyphenols in your bloodstream, do you know? But so I don't really know what to add to that, Alba. Just that.
That's good. I suppose, like, is it kind of okay to mention about her not really having many antioxidants in her diet and kind of relating it in there? Like, would that be applicable, do you feel?
Yeah, that's a great point. So, like, with so the thing is, okay, so there is some, so with glutathione and SOD, there's some research on that, and you can link it back. You could hypothesize, let's say, that, the client's diet, as you're saying, is low in, colorful fruit and vegetables, and therefore she might be lacking specific phytonutrients. They have been shown to, let's say, help to balance the immune system. And, that's, if there's chronic inflammation, that's going to further add to the levels of oxidative stress. So that's, that's kind of using, let's say, hypothesis thinking without any solid research, but that's okay to do, definitely. And it's good that you're thinking like that, kind of beyond this as well. We've done it a bit as well with, where is it? Sorry, I'm trying to find the kit. Oh no, it's this one. See here, so there aren't any specific research papers linking toxin exposure to ME/CFS. However, heavy metals such as fluoride and arsenic have been shown to interfere with the Krebs cycle enzymes. Herbicides have been shown to bind to inhibit the electron transport chain. So you could say, like, whilst there isn't any research specifically, and again, you could go out and search for some research, and there could be something around polyphenols and inflammation in CFS patients. But if there isn't, you could still, like, hypothesize that these nutrients are important to help balance inflammation and oxidative stress, and the fact that her diet is low in them, it could be further contributing to the chronic inflammation, or not dampening it down. You could say that about essential fatty acids as well, like omega-3.
Brilliant, that's great, thank you.
And that's, on that note, like, if you do think of other things that you want to add in, and like you could mention essential fatty acids if you wanted here, like, that's absolutely fine. And you want to go beyond it, just remember, you just have to get these they're not basic points, I appreciate that, but these key points in, and then layer up. Like, there's going to be stuff that we've missed or haven't thought of, and if you add them in as well, that's absolutely fine. I know this is like, it's a challenging assessment, and that, it's the first time as well that you've had to write, a 2,000 word report in the assessment, or a 2,000 word assessment, like most of them being quite short. So I know it can seem a bit daunting, but once you start getting into it and following the structure and, like, looking at the individual chunks, hopefully it'll come together. Anyone else?
Maura, Gwen said that this case is actually a real case.
Yeah, Lynn said, you guys haven't met or didn't meet Lynn. Lynn finished up this year. It was one of her clients.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask
how she got on. I think she improved. Yeah. I think she improved a lot, but would still kind of wasn't 100%. Like, Lynn kind of wanted to do some more genetic tests with her, but that didn't. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know she did really improve. When she followed, took the IFM approach, which is good.
Today I watched on YouTube a lecture from Dr. Jacob, I can't spell his name. Oh gosh, I'm finding it hard. Do you know? Oh gosh.
It's the end of the year, we're all dead.
And it's late for me as well. I forgot his name. You don't. Anyway, when I get it, I'll put it on the message.
Okay.
Because he mentioned about he had it
Okay.
when he was young, and he's been working on fibromyalgia and CFS for 35 years. And
wow.
He's using a holistic approach and biomedical as well. And then he comes up with a treatment, some sort of, like he said, it's curable for him. I will maybe put the link. Let me find his name, because I've watched as well something on the coronavirus today. So.
I know, yeah, there's loads. There's quite a lot. It's quite topical at the moment in terms of COVID could be a trigger for it.
Yeah, because he talks about it as well.
Yeah. I think this is the thing, that I think that many people will do well if they follow an IFM approach. Because if you think about it, even things like magnesium deficiency, lacking, the impact that carnitine could have, CoQ10, addressing dysbiosis. And there's so much that we can do. I don't think it's not like 100%, cure rate in a sense. Some people will just there'll be something within their metabolism that's kind of needs more deeper work in a sense, or more specific. But I think, the basic approach will be really helpful for people.
Yeah. So his name is Teitelbaum.
Okay.
Jacob Teitel, Teitelbaum.
Okay.
Very interesting, really interesting
guy, and how he approached it. Yeah. Post it on the forum, Linda, so people can.
Yeah, I will. I just watched that today, and I found it very interesting.
Okay, great.
So I will post it on the forum.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if there's a lot more research done over the next few years now, or if it continues to increase, because the fact that there does seem to be this post-viral fatigue, and then potentially will that lead to ME/CFS with people who've had COVID. So we'll see.
Of course, the lecture I watched was from 2015.
Okay.
The COVID was, of course, now recently. So I just want to mention that. So it's not just still 5 years ago. So I don't know what happened since then. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? No. Okay, well, let me just, before we finish up. Where's it gone? Yeah. So yeah, just use this as a guide, and use the case for report, and make sure you look at the mind map. I'll upload this PowerPoint tomorrow. I think I've just closed it, but I did have a PowerPoint just highlighting a couple of key things. And that's it. So I just want to say as well, because I know it's been a really intense year for people, and this is NLCD itself is an intense year. So and then if you layer on top COVID and the impact that that's had on your studies and that, I'm sure you're all exhausted. And the fact that you got this far, and that you are, about to hopefully complete this, or, pass this assessment, it's such a testament to the amount of knowledge and skills that you've learned throughout the year. So it is a really big achievement. So well done.
Thanks, Maura.
Sorry, Maura, can I just ask a question? We got an email from the college, and I know they said to raise it with you at the end. I'm not sure who it was that was emailing me back, but it's just in relation to the qualification. So they were talking about removing this year's qualification and just having one at the end of, I think, next year.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure, is it the case that we can get this year's qualification and the same, the upgraded one next year? I wasn't sure what the difference was.
The difference. Okay, so when we first accredited this program, they said that you could only have one level, and if you, let's say, created a 3-year program, it could only be at, let's say, level 4 or level 5 or level 6. You had to be all one level, and because we wanted you guys, our students, to leave with level 6, what we did was we broke it into 3 qualifications. So it was NLC at level 4, NLCD at level 5, and then PNT at level 6. So therefore you had this qualification after this year, and then there was PNT, which is next year, and clinical practice. But for whatever reason, Crossfield, who are the awarding body, have changed that now. And what it means is that we can actually combine the 2 years. So NLC is staying as a standalone program because some people just come in and just do NLC. But what it meant was that we could actually combine what's currently now year 2, 3, and 4, and just make one diploma. So this is actually a good thing, because it's just then there's one diploma in nutritional therapy, and you're finishing at level 6. So even though what you've done this year will still be written to level 5, it means the overall diploma is level 6. So it might not seem like a positive thing, but it actually is. That being said, if you want to get the diploma after this year because you signed up as NLCD, you can do that. So you can, let's say, get the nutrition, lifestyle, and chronic disease qualification, and then you can also finish with nutritional therapy diploma after you finish clinical practice. That's absolutely possible.
So do you mean you can get the new level? Is it 6 or what level? Sorry, level.
You can get
diploma. You can get that and get this year's qualification.
Yeah, but fair enough. It might look better, let's say, if you have listing the different courses that you've done. But if someone asks you about it, it'll, even though you'll have, like, the nutritional therapy diploma contains this diploma. So it's all the same thing in a sense.
But we can get nutritional therapy diploma and get this year's diploma, technically.
Yeah.
So because that would make more sense, in the sense that just in case something happened maybe next year and you couldn't finish it out.
That's fair
enough. Want to get, I can understand for years going forward, it makes, you might remove it. But for our year, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't losing something. If I ask for this year's diploma, that I also get the new revised diploma, because I've still done the same work.
Yeah, exactly. And it does mean, let's say, that you can, if you get the diploma this year, you can put that down. Like if let's say you're wanting to, let's say you're working in a certain area, you want to start considering moving into maybe something within this field, you could start looking and already have that qualification, and that could be helpful. The thing with it is, practically you can't do very much with it. So let's say people who've done NLC, most of you have done NLC, having this as an extra diploma, you can't apply what you've learned and that's like a caveat within the diploma, until you do the PNT, i.e. nutritional therapy material, because that's what the clinical practice units are in. So it's more of a theory unit. But
there's no negative from taking the diploma this year and continuing on, but you still get the upgraded diploma at the end of, is it next year or year 4?
It's at the end. Yeah, it's going to be, what we're going to do is actually change. So we're going to call next year going forward nutritional therapy year 2, because technically that's what it is in the diploma. So you'll be able to get NLCD diploma and then also the nutritional therapy one. Yeah.
The upgrade. Yeah. So it makes more sense to do it that way then, in one way. Then that's where I was confusing me, because I know maybe for NLCs it makes sense to send out the communication, but for ourselves, I didn't understand whether I was being at a disadvantage if I said, yes, I want this year's diploma, or whether,
whether you'd like, let me just check with Sally again. I'm like 95% sure that you can get both of them.
If you could check that'd be great, because that's where I was just really confused by it, and I was kind of thinking it makes more sense to get both, and I don't know why you wouldn't get both, because you've done the same work by the end once you continue on, obviously. that'd be great. More if you could check that and maybe put it up on the.
I'll post it on the forum. Yeah.
Yeah, because preferably I'd like to get it rather than not have anything, and just in case something happened maybe next year or something. At least
Yeah,
you know you
no,
have it.
that's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Moira, I didn't actually get that email. I know I've had issues with my email, but I didn't receive that. I was just wondering, it'd be good to get it.
Yeah, I don't know what. Let me just check. I'll ask Sally tomorrow why she wouldn't have sent it, and she'll probably have actually on the list. She'll have who she sent it to, and if she has sent it to you, it probably would be good to check your email because you
For
might
sure.
get things from us. But
Yeah.
if she hasn't, yeah, I'll make sure she sends it on to you so you know.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And actually, as well, Moira, sorry, just one thing with the word count as well. Do you know when it says at the start of the main body just to list the main clinical imbalances that we feel or whatever? Is that counted in the word count as well?
This one here.
Or no, it was a different. Let me just double check. I think it was in the main body. It just said start off introducing.
Here. Yes, it is in the main. Yeah, this is part of it. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. That's great. Lovely. Just to clarify that.
Sorry, Maura, just check on that, on the referencing as well. You know, the way if you just say a sentence and then you have IHS 2019, whatever PowerPoint, the slide number, that isn't included in your word count, isn't it not? Because it's like you could have a number of them throughout your text.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me just check with Melissa tomorrow. I would have thought the references are included in the word count, but let me just come back to you on that.
Just on previous assignments, I don't think I had it that way, and it wasn't. Yeah.
They didn't pick it up. Okay.
Yeah, so I thought that's what it was, because I thought we were told the references weren't included, the in-text references. But I'm not sure if anyone else remembers.
Yeah, I think we were told that they were. I've always taken them out and not counted them. Having asked that before, but obviously if we need to clarify it, we should.
Yeah, I'll come back to you tomorrow on that. But if you've already been doing it and haven't been picked up, anyway, I'll message you tomorrow.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Okay, everyone. So if you don't have any questions, I will let you go.
Thanks very much, Maura. Thanks for everything.
Thank you, Maura.
Thanks a million, Maura.
Thanks, Maura.
Enjoy the break.
You too. Enjoy the break, folks. We'll see you in September.
Bye.
Sure.
Have a good,
Bye.
Thank you.
good summer.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.